Okay, let's demonstrate something for Bolt visual scripting from scratch in less than 5 minutes. All right, I'm going to start off with a basic empty Unity project. Okay, the only thing that's been added already to the project, Bolt has been installed. Okay, so go through that. Install Bolt. Empty scene. We're going to go ahead. I also have some pixel art in here, just a texture, and I'm going to, as an example, I'm just going to grab a axe and put it in my scene. All right, so I have an axe in my scene. I'm going to add a component to it. I'm going to add a rigid body 2D to it so that there are some physics involved. All right, I'm also going to set the gravity for that rigid body 2D to 0, right, so that it'll float in place. So if I press play now, nothing happens. Okay, so nothing happens, but I want something to happen. All right, what do I want to have happen? I want it to spin. All right, so normally to have it spin, I would do something like add a torque to that rigid body. I would do that as part of a script, but instead I'm going to do it using a bolt graph. Okay, for that I'm going to say bolt. I'm going to head and put a flow machine on it. I'm going to make it a macro, which means that I could reuse this somewhere else. I'm going to go to bolt graphs, and I'm going to call this spin macro. Okay, save it. All right, now edit the graph. So you'll see I have a start event and an update event, just like I would have a start event and an update event in any C# script. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this start event, and I'm going to add a unit. Okay, and that unit is going to be a rigid body 2D dot what? Add, and you'll see add torque. All right, add torque. So if I click that, add that means, okay, on start, the next thing that's going to get called is rigid body add torque. And this is the function call. It's going to say, okay, the self means it's the one that's on this particular game component, and the torque that it's going to add, I'm going to say, okay, add a torque of 60 to that. All right, so if I hit play, it will now, in my game, it will spin. It's going to get that torque added to it immediately on start. You'll see it'll eventually slow down. So to make this more useful, I want to expose that to make it something I can see inside of my editor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch this out so I'll wind up seeing the graph inspector and the variable window. I'm going to make a object. So these variables are shared across the current object, and we're going to call this the add torque. Okay, and we're going to make it a float. So now we have a scene, or excuse me, an object variable that would be able to be seen up here. There's the float. Now I need my graph to be able to see it. So I'm going to say right click again, add unit, and I'm going to say variable. And you'll see get flow and so on and so on. Variable, and we'll say object. Give it a hint. Nope. Variable, get object variable. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Get object variable. Okay, there it is. And it's getting it from itself. And the question is which one? The only object variable I've set so far is add the torque to add. So I'm going to hook that up. All right. Now I can set it here to be 600. All right. Now you'll see it's changed up here as well. So now if I close this, I can modify and tune right there. So I'll get a torque of 600 added to the rigid body on that axe. Okay, so if I stop, and just to make it obvious, I'll make it 10,000. Add a huge torque to that object on its startup. Boom. Eventually they'll slow down. All right, so that's about the most basic thing you can start off with doing. Okay, we're adding a torque to a rigid body using our macro graph here. Okay, so we have an example of getting a variable in a scene, calling what's basically a function, add torque to the current rigid body in this particular object, and using a variable to set the value. And here's our flow. The start event calls this. Okay, so there we are, under 5 minutes. Give it a try. Welcome to Torque. No, welcome to Bolt.